She never expected a simple no to echo so loudly in her life. When she politely refused his invitation for coffee, it wasn't out of dislike, but out of fear of repeating mistakes she promised never to make again. She had seen charming men turn cold, promises melt, and hearts break loudly. So she kept walls high and smiles polite. What she didn't know was that the man she refused was a quiet millionaire who didn't lead with his money, only his patience. When she turned away that first night, he only nodded, as if he had just been given a puzzle instead of rejection. He didn't chase in the loud way people expected rich men to chase things. No flowers raining from the sky, no dramatic declarations in public places. Instead, he simply began appearing on the street outside her apartment complex each evening, leaning against his car with hands in pockets, as if the city lights were his only companion. He never called out to her. Never pressured. He only greeted her when she walked by. "Good evening, how was your day?" As though the simplest question in the world was enough company. Neighbors whispered. Some thought it was romantic, others thought it was strange. She thought it was foolish. "You don't have to stand here," she told him on the third night. He smiled softly, replying, "I know. Waiting is a choice, not a burden." The way he said it unsettled her walls more than she wanted to admit. She hurried inside, telling herself none of this mattered, that patience was just another tactic. But every night the familiar silhouette reappeared, constant as the lamppost beside him. Days blurred into weeks, and his presence threaded itself into the rhythm of her evenings. She found herself glancing out the window before making tea, just to see if he was there. And he always was, sometimes with a book, sometimes watching the sky, sometimes just breathing in the night air. No demands, no sighs, just presence. It became harder for her to pretend she didn't notice the gentleness of it all. Rain didn't stop him. On the first stormy evening, she opened her building door and saw him soaked, hair flattened, yet smiling like the rain itself had greeted him. Annoyance flared inside her like lightning. "This is ridiculous," she said, walking toward him with an umbrella. "You'll get sick." He laughed softly. "Then I'll have an excuse to take a day off." She shoved the umbrella into his hand and walked away, but the warmth in her chest lingered longer than she wanted. She began to learn his silence. The way he looked at the world like it was fragile. The way he asked about her day without prying into her past. She learned he was a millionaire only when a child from the neighborhood pointed to a magazine cover he was on. The shock hit her hard. He never mentioned wealth or business or status, and that made it impossible to label him as just another arrogant man with everything but time. Time, in fact, was exactly what he kept giving her. One night, she snapped. "What do you want?" she demanded, voice trembling with frustration and a hint of fear she couldn't hide. He didn't move closer. He didn't try to touch her. He only answered honestly, "I want the chance you're afraid to give. And if the answer stays no forever, I will still hope your days are kind." She didn't know whether to cry or run, so she did neither. She just stood there, words stuck in her throat like unshed tears. Memories of past heartbreak surfaced like waves crashing against old wounds. She remembered broken promises spoken in sweet tones. She remembered being chosen last. And here stood a man who chose to stay without guarantees. That night she couldn't sleep. His patience wasn't pressure, it was mirror, reflecting her fears back to her. Was she refusing him, or refusing the possibility of happiness? A night finally came when he wasn't outside. The space he usually filled felt strangely loud in its emptiness. She waited by the window longer than she wanted to admit. Hours slipped by, and she told herself it didn't matter, that his absence meant freedom. Yet her chest felt heavier than it had in months. She whispered to the dark, "So you finally gave up," not sure if it sounded like relief or disappointment. The next evening he still wasn't there. The third night hurt more than it should have. She walked out anyway, feeling the pavement beneath her feet, each step echoing with questions she had never dared articulate. Had she secretly relied on his presence? Was patience something you could get addicted to? She hugged herself against the cold, realizing the street without him felt wrong. On the fourth night, she finally saw him again, but he wasn't standing. He was sitting on the curb, a bandage on his hand, fatigue in his eyes. He stood the moment he saw her, smile tired but sincere. "Sorry," he said lightly, "business storm. I didn't want you to think I disappeared." The ridiculousness of it almost made her laugh and cry at once. He worried about disappointing her when she had never promised him anything. "Why me?" she asked softly. For the first time, He hesitated, searching for words big enough for his answer. Because you listen when people speak. Because you don't pretend to be impressed. Because when you refused, you did it gently. And because every night I stand here, I feel calmer than anywhere else. His voice cracked slightly on the last sentence, and she realized patience also cost something. The wall inside her didn't fall all at once. It cracked slowly. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. He smiled as though those were the most beautiful words he had waited for. Then we don't rush, he replied. We start with hello. Again. It was a fragile shift, but real. For the first time, she didn't walk past him. She stood beside him beneath the lamplight, sharing silence without fear. The city became their witness. Stray cats, passing cars, flickering lights, all watched their wordless evenings. Sometimes they talked about nonsense, favorite foods, books neither finished, dreams they didn't fully understand. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, and the quiet did the healing. She began to understand that waiting wasn't about winning, it was about respecting the time another heart needed. People told him he was foolish. He smiled and agreed. Love, to him, wasn't transaction or chase, it was presence. She overheard someone calling her lucky and almost laughed. They didn't see the nights she trembled with doubt or the mornings she wondered if she was worth staying for. But every evening he showed up, not as a savior, not as a hero, just as a man who chose consistency. One evening she arrived late. He turned quickly, worry flashing in his eyes before softening into relief. Something gentle shifted between them then, something unspoken but undeniable. She realized that for the first time in years, someone's concern didn't feel like control. It felt like care, simple and unadorned. If I say yes, she whispered one night, voice barely louder than the breeze, promise me we go slow. He didn't celebrate or shout or rush toward her. He only nodded, eyes shining. Slow is all I ever wanted, he said. Her heart didn't explode with fireworks, instead, it exhaled, tired of hiding. Their first date wasn't extravagant despite his wealth. No helicopter rooftops, no glittering halls. Just a quiet cafe with warm light and the simple miracle of her comfortable laughter. She caught herself smiling without fear and wondered when the world had softened around her walls. She later admitted something shyly. It wasn't the money, the car, or the waiting. It was the way you never pushed. He replied, patience isn't waiting outside. Patience is not walking into someone's life before they open the door themselves. And she finally understood that what once looked like stubborn pursuit had actually been respect in disguise. She once refused the first date out of fear. She finally accepted it out of healing. And the millionaire who waited outside every night hadn't been waiting to win, he had been waiting for permission to care. This time when she walked toward him, she didn't rush. She didn't run. She simply reached for his hand, and for the first time, her heart didn't flinch.